Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us for another edition of our webinar series, Inside Immigration. Today, we are joined by Permanent Resident Practice Director Hilete Stein and Associate Ellie Slavens. Please feel free to ask any questions through the pop-up text bar on your screen, and we'll do our best to address your questions at the end of the webinar. If the panelists do not get to your question, you can contact them through the information provided on screen. And with that being said, I'll hand things over to our panelists.
Thanks, Stephen. So we have a lot of new updates to go over today, and we'll start off by going through some of the permanent residence updates that have happened over the last month or so. So first off, we'll talk about the new permanent resident pathways that were announced recently and are opening up next week. We'll go over some of the express entry trends that we've seen over the last month or so, an update on caregiver applications, and then we'll move into some of the COVID-specific travel updates regarding the flight ban from India and Pakistan, the updated order in council, some changes with respect to the quarantine requirements, and an update on hotel quarantine. So I'll start off with the new PR pathways, because I think there's a lot of questions on that. And we'll try and answer whatever we can, but again, open to questions at the end of the presentation. So essentially, we had an announcement recently that there will be 2 new PR pathways opening up based on a temporary public policy, and they will be opening up on May 6th next week. And the purpose of these new pathways is essentially to number one, recognize the economic contributions of temporary foreign workers who are already in Canada, to stabilize the workforce in regards to essential occupations in Canada, to facilitate Francophone immigration outside of Quebec, and also to work towards really meeting the immigration targets that were set out for 2021 to try and make up for some of the shortfall that we saw back in 2020. So the programs are opening up May 6th, and they will remain open until the caps are reached, and there's a cap across all the streams of 90,000 applications, with the exception of the Francophone streams, and I'll explain what that is in a little bit. And so the programs will remain open until these caps are reached, or for streams that don't have caps, they will be open until November 5th. So whatever happens earlier. In terms of the requirements for these new programs, there are requirements that are the same across all of the streams. One requirement is that applicants have to physically be living in Canada with valid temporary status, both at the time that the application is submitted as well as when the application is approved. The applicants have to intend to live outside of Quebec. So these streams are for immigration outside of Quebec. If applicants are living in Quebec at the time of the application but intend to move during the processing or when they become permanent residents, that's fine, and will just need to be explained as part of the application. And applicants also have to be employed in Canada at the time that the application is received. So with respect to employment in Canada, unfortunately, self-employment will not count unless the applicant is working as a medical doctor and is in a fee-for-service agreement with one of the health authorities in Canada. So any self-employment won't count, but applicants have to be employed. Okay, and these are sort of requirements that are across all of the new pathways that have been announced. With respect to the essential occupations pathway, there are some additional requirements in that applicants have to have a language test from a designated organization. So we're talking IELTS, CELPIP, TEF for French, or TCF for French. And they have to have a CLB of 4 across all 4 of the language abilities on the test. As well, they have to have a year of full-time work experience or part-time equivalent, so 1,560 hours in Canada in the last 3 years in one or more of the eligible occupations that are listed. So at the end of the policy, there are 2 annexes which list all of the eligible occupations. Annex A includes health-related occupations. Annex B would be other essential occupations, a lot of which are actually under lower skilled NOC categories. So you have NOCs there, such as retail related NOCs, cashiers, etc. And you have to be able to show that you have 1 year of experience in the last 3 in Canada in one of these eligible occupations. You can also show if you have a year of experience in a combination of an occupation under Annex A and Annex B, that's fine as well. So that's the essential occupations pathway. With respect to the recent graduate pathway, applicants have to be able to show that they have completed a program of study in Canada at a designated learning institution, and the program has to have been completed no earlier than January of 2017, and also has to have been completed before the application is submitted. And then the applicants as well have to be able to demonstrate that they were authorized to study in Canada during their program of study. With respect to the credentials that were granted, so if the applicant's granted a university degree, such as a bachelor, master's, PhD, the program has to have been at least 8 months or longer. If they were granted a diploma, certificate, or attestation, the program has to have been at least 2 years or 16 months long. And if you took, let's say, 2 college diplomas that combined were a total of 16 months, that's fine as well, as long as each of the credentials was completed no earlier than January of 2017. Or alternatively, if you did a degree, diploma, certificate, or attestation that did not meet one of those length requirements, but it did lead to an occupation in a skilled trade as outlined in Annex A of the policy for recent graduates, then you can also qualify for that program. So one example would be, under that annex, you have the occupation for chefs. If you did a culinary diploma leading to that trade, then you may qualify regardless of the length of the program of study. And one thing that is also interesting is that the policy doesn't seem to indicate that you have to have worked in that trade, just that your credential leads to an occupation in one of the listed trades. As well, applicants under the recent graduate pathway have to provide language test results from accredited language institutions. So again, IELTS, CELPIP, TEF, or TCF, and you have to be able to demonstrate a CLB of 5 or higher under each of the 4 language abilities. So that's sort of a high-level overview of the program requirements for eligibility to apply under one of these new pathways. Overall, there is going to be an intake cap of 90,000 applications under the streams for recent graduates as well as essential occupations. And that's going to be broken down as a cap of 40,000 under the recent graduates pathway, 50,000 under the essential occupations pathway, and that 50,000 is further broken down to 20,000 under the people who have experience in the health-related occupations, and 30,000 for people with experience under the essential occupations list. If an applicant provides French language test results that are a CLB of 4 or higher in each of the 4 language abilities, then they are not subject to the caps under these new pathways. So that's really great news for individuals who do speak French and have a French language test result. It's a little bit less of a rush for them to get the applications in, soon after the program opens. In terms of processing, so it is going to be an online intake system. Applicants will need to create an online account and basically submit forms and supporting documentation to demonstrate how they meet the eligibility criteria for the stream under which they are applying. Applications that don't include some of the requisite supporting documents will simply be refused. So there's not going to be sort of a rejection process. It'll just be a straight up refusal. So really important to make sure that you're providing all of the documentation to demonstrate how the eligibility criteria are met at the time that you submit the application. Once the applications are submitted, if you do have a representative who assists you with the application, your representative can link it to their portal with IRCC. And in terms of submissions, the system is going to be tracking the number of submission clicks to determine when the caps under each stream are reached. Processing time has not really been set out yet, so there's no standard processing time for this pathway set, but we're anticipating that IRCC is likely striving to get these processed by year end in an effort to meet the immigration targets for 2021. We are expecting pretty high demand for these programs, in particular for the recent graduate stream. So they will likely fill up quickly, and we are recommending that people try and get their documents in order, as quickly as possible to try and submit as soon as they can. And another question that has also arisen is, can you apply for more than one of the pathways? So let's say you qualify both for the recent grad pathway and for the essential occupations pathway. There doesn't seem to be any specific bar to applying under more than one pathway. So, what we'd probably recommend is, try and do both if you qualify for both. Let's see if you can get a spot. In terms of applicants who are competitive under both the new pathways and express entry, you may want to continue to go the express entry route. Again, because of the caps under these new streams, they likely will fill up fairly quickly. So especially if you've already received an invitation to apply for permanent residence under the express entry system, we would recommend applying for PR via the express entry route. And in terms of trends under express entry, so we have continued to see somewhat of a downward trend in the cutoff scores over the last month or so. The draws are continuing to target candidates who meet the Canadian Experience Class category, so those candidates who have at least a year of Canadian work experience in a skilled occupation. We have not had any federal skilled worker draws in quite some time. We have, however, also had some provincial nominee draws for individuals who have already been nominated by a province under one of the provincial express entry streams. So the most recent draw we had was April 16th, where 6,000 invitations were issued. The cutoff score was at 417 points. Prior to that, April 1st, there was a Canadian Experience Class draw with 5,000 invitations issued. Cutoff score was 432. And before that, on March 18th, another 5,000 invitations with the cutoff score of 449. So we've really been seeing this sort of downward trend in terms of the cutoff score, which is good news. And we're still encouraging people who meet one of those program criteria to create a profile and get yourself in the system. Because we all learned in February that the scores can go quite low, and you want to make sure that you're in the system if you qualify and have a chance at getting that invitation. We also are expecting, we don't have any indication in terms of when the next federal skilled worker draw might be, but we are expecting that immigration will likely continue to focus on applicants who are already in Canada, at least while the border restrictions continue to be in place. I'll move on to talk about caregiver applications. So we did have a nice processing update announced over the last month. We haven't really seen much movement on these applications over the past year or so, but IRCC did announce that by the end of 2021, we can expect 6,000 caregiver applications to be finalized. And those are really for applicants who have already completed their Canadian work experience requirement. So it would be the PR portion of those applications. As well, by June 30th of 2021, there will be 1,500 stage 1 decisions on caregiver applications that were filed under the home child care provider and home support worker pilots. And what these will do is they will allow caregiver work permits to be issued for caregivers who applied under those programs who have valid job offers in Canada. And we haven't really seen too many of those, if any, processed yet, so that's welcome news. And as well, applicants under the caregiver programs will or should receive an acknowledgement of receipt by May 31st of this year if they haven't already. So that's it on the PR updates. Fairly busy month with respect to permanent residents. So I'll turn it over to Ellie to go through some of the COVID travel updates.
Thanks, Hilete. Hi, everybody. So been busy on the COVID and travel restriction side of things as well, as you can imagine, and I've read in the news, no doubt. Most notably, the recent travel ban that was announced for 30 days for all commercial and private flights leaving India and Pakistan. So we've had a lot of questions from people about individuals who, might be stranded in India, but there is some hope because those individuals can still come back to Canada if they can go to a third country where they can get a COVID test and then transit on to Canada. So in one example, we had a person sitting, I think, in the Newark airport for 8 hours or so getting a COVID test over the weekend and then transiting on back to Canada. So that is still possible. Of course, that throws a wrench into a lot of people's travel plans, and some people, may not be able to transit to a third country depending on visa requirements. So there are still factors to be considered, but let's say with repatriating or returning Canadians or something, for example, they would still be able to get home if they could arrange to go to a third country and have a pre-departure testing done there that they could show as their pre-departure test for coming to Canada. So yeah, that was done based on high rates of positive tests for people coming from those countries into Canada. And another change that we've seen with the quarantine requirements are that when a person is coming into the country and they are taking their home test kit that they have to bring with them after doing their arrival testing at the border. So the arrival testing at the border would either be at the land border crossing if they're at one of the 16 land border crossings that currently offers testing capacity. So there's an updated list of 16 land border crossings right now that are currently able to provide on-site testing. However, that's only during certain hours of the day. So for example, I had my aunt and uncle coming back through Canada through Buffalo recently, and they were traveling at night and the testing center was closed at the time of day that they were coming through. So they were given the home test kit that you would receive at any other land border crossing coming into Canada, which does not have testing capacity. So it might be that you're coming in through a land border that does have testing capacity, but if the office is closed, you'll still get that home test kit to take with you. And the change that we've seen there is that the home test kit that's provided both at the airports and also the land borders for what used to be day 10 test is now going to be done on day 8. So that's a change that was recently announced. And from our understanding, just from word of mouth with the clients who've been doing these tests, it is taking quite a long time to create an account and get on the phone with the proper nurse that needs to be present while you open your test kit and have you complete the test, upwards of several hours in some cases we've heard. And so the latest advice we have on that front is to try calling as early as possible in the morning to get that test done before, as the day goes on, it gets busier and busier with lots of people trying to call and get their day 8 tests. Well, it was formerly day 10, but their day 8 tests now completed. And because you're actually not even supposed to open the test kit until you're on the phone with the nursing staff, it could be very time consuming for people that are in quarantine trying to get that completed and trying to comply. So that is a slight change, just the day 10.
I think, Ellie, they have a nice little video as well. So if you're bored while you're waiting for the nurse to come on, you can watch their video on what to do and how to take your test.
I haven't seen the video, but I should probably watch it.
Great video. Highly recommend it.
Okay. And yeah, so I mean, some people traveling by land are, you know, if there's a choice of border crossing and you're able to select one of the land border crossings that does have testing, you know, that's probably a good idea if you're close to, let's say, the Peace Bridge versus the Rainbow Bridge or something. Let me just read off the locations of the bridges for you that have the testing. But yes, if you have a choice and you're close to one that does have the on-site testing, that would be your best bet to try and get it done while driving across the border there, versus having to take that test kit home with you and spend, you know, a lot of frustrating time trying to get on the phone, because you're going to have to do that anyway on day 8. So might as well try and avoid doing it, you know, at the land border crossing if you're traveling to Canada by land. So if you're coming in by air, then of course you're doing that arrival test at the airport, and you're being directed in most cases to the quarantine hotels, unless you're exempt from the quarantine hotel. And the news on the quarantine hotels is that currently, you know, there's no change, although there was a federal court challenge and for an injunction, which is was not granted, and we'll have to see if anything else plays out with the federal court challenge that's been made against the constitutionality of the quarantine hotels. But for the time being, they stand, they're still there. We have clients often asking, you know, but, you know, the $3,000 for the quarantine hotel in 3 nights, it's not really necessarily the $3,000 in 3 nights. I mean, you have to book for 3 nights, but you're really there in the quarantine hotel waiting until you get your arrival results back. So that could be, you know, after 24 hours, it could be after 2 days. Most people are not actually staying in the quarantine hotel for the full 3 days. And from the reports that I've had, the actual rates for the hotel are more like $240 a night, as opposed to, you know, $3,000 for the hotel stay. So I have had to, you know, calm some employers down who are like, what? This is going to be $3,000 for each of my 2 workers, and you know, and then the person is still going to require their quarantine plan to present for the remainder of the quarantine time. They're still going to have to put all their information into the ArriveCan app and then report in, and there's lots of check-ins happening that we've been made aware of, lots of site visits, officers showing up at people's front doors multiple times in some cases. So there is enforcement, and it's rampant, but you know, that's the hotel is not as bad as it used to be in terms of what it was thought that it was going to be. And you can book online for the hotels now. It's a lot easier to confirm your booking, as opposed to like when it was first rolled out and there was one phone number where everyone was trying to get through for 9 hours on hold and nobody could get through. And then some people were trying to book directly with the hotel, but they needed the QR code. So the booking process is more streamlined now. The hotel options have been expanded. There are more hotels. I still wouldn't be keen to stay in one of these hotels based on reports and stories, you know, in the media, but, you know, that is currently the situation. It hasn't changed in terms of being mandatory. And then, am I missing an? Oh, the updated order in council. So yes, on April 21st, we had the new orders in council for travel, restricting travel from anywhere outside of the US and also from the US directly, that have been extended from April 21st to May 21st. So we have the same exemptions. The orders in council are very similar, that are exactly similar. They have, you know, you're exempt from being caught under the restrictions for travel from the United States if it's for a non-optional, non-discretionary purpose, which remains to be the case. And then we have our employees coming from abroad who are only exempt from the travel restrictions if they meet one of the exemption categories, for example, holding a letter of approval for a work permit or holding a valid work permit because they've left, or perhaps being exempt under one of the exemptions for immediate family members who get reunification letters. So those are still in place. They've been renewed. They have different order in council numbers that are now in place till May 21st. And that's sort of the update on that front. They were 1-month extensions. The last orders in council were valid for 2 months, from March until, or sorry, February until April. And did I miss anything, Hilete, that you can think of?
That's it. Maybe we will see if anybody has any questions. Okay, so we have, we'll just kind of go through these, and we'll try to get to everybody's questions, but if not, feel free to email Ellie or I afterwards, and we're happy to chat. So this question is, my client left the country in order to write the IELTS, and his flight was delayed for May 8th. What if she can apply from back home May 6th? I assume that that is in relation to the PR new pathways. So you have to be in Canada in order to submit the application. So if they're not back by May 6th, then they'll have to unfortunately wait until they're back here. The requirement is that they have to be employed in Canada and an invalid temporary status at the time the application is submitted. How is self-employed defined? Again, this is a question on the new pathways. What if someone is working in a professional category but owns 40% of the company? So the definition of self-employment essentially matches the Income Tax Act definition. So they look at a variety of factors, including ownership of the company, direction and control over day-to-day activities, ability to hire or terminate staff and employees. So there's a whole list of definitions and criteria that the government will look at to determine whether somebody is self-employed or not. You know, one of the sort of criteria we can look at is as well as CRA assessment. So, you know, if the person has been issued a T4, most likely they're an employee of the company. You can, if you're not sure whether you'll be considered to be self-employed or not, there is a form you can file with the CRA to get a determination on whether you are considered to be self-employed or not, although you probably, my guess is, would not get that back necessarily by the program opening date of May 6th, but it may be something that's worthwhile to apply for in case, you know, there's any questions regarding whether you're an employee or self-employed. You may get that back, you know, to answer those types of questions.
Sorry, the Rainbow Bridge and the Peace Bridge both have on-site testing. I just was double checking my list. I finally found where my tab was. During business hours. I'm just trying to pull up some of the questions we got yesterday.
Yes, there's another one on the pathway. Can you clarify if the person is not employed, but a holder of a work permit is eligible for the graduate pathway to PR? No, so you have to be employed at the time of the application. And the employment, by the way, you know, you don't necessarily have to be employed in a full-time capacity. So if you have, you know, a part-time job, and you know, you're working a couple of hours a week, but you're an employee of a company, then that's fine, that would qualify. Okay. Under the recent graduate stream, is there any likely requirement for WES, or is the focus on Canadian study? No, there's no requirement to provide a WES because the pathway is looking at education in Canada. So likely you would have to provide proof of your program completion. It was completed no earlier than January of 2017. And then you'd want to be able to provide proof of the duration of the program of study as well, to make sure that you meet that requirement. So if you have transcripts from the program, that would likely demonstrate the duration, or perhaps a letter from the school as well. Okay. Lots of questions on the new pathways. And I should say that, you know, there is more information to be expected. We don't yet have the actual IRCC program guides. They have not yet been released for the new pathways. So there may be more information coming up in the next week or so on the specific document requirements for these streams.
Somebody asked about the difference in travel restrictions for the Canadians. So, I mean, the same would apply if they would be coming from India or Pakistan. They wouldn't be able to board a flight because there aren't any flights directly from those countries. So they would have to transit to a third country and undergo testing, pre-departure testing that's mandatory for entry before they could board another flight to come to Canada.
Okay, somebody's asking again about the steps to apply under the new PR pathways. So again, it's an online intake application where you'll have to go in, create an account for yourself, and upload all of the supporting documents and forms through the intake system. And then once you hit the submit button, the counter basically counts that towards reaching the intake caps for the program.
Somebody is also asking about quarantine exemptions for essential workers. So that's a good question, because right now there has been no change, but there was supposed to be an announcement being made that was going to perhaps facilitate some more travel for people in the automotive industry that we were waiting for it to come through, but that has not happened yet to my knowledge. So I think that was something that the government was working on, expanding the examples and the list of people who are deemed essential.
Okay, we have a question on if eligible applicants who did not previously apply under Express Entry, can they directly apply for the new PR streams? The answer to that would be yes. If they're eligible for the new PR streams, then they can apply directly for these streams. They don't necessarily have to be eligible for Express Entry. It's a separate stream with different program criteria.
Hilete, somebody's asking if you can use the same CIC account from the previous study permit for the new pathway. Did you already address that?
In terms of the account creation, they haven't yet released the details, so we're still waiting for confirmation on what the account creation process will be. Okay, if you are working for a Canadian company but out of the country on a job, is that considered being in Canada? No, typically you have to physically be here working for the company in Canada. Okay, so I think that's all we have time for today. Thank you, everybody. Lots of great questions, and I'll turn it back to you, Stephen.
Thanks, Hilete. I'd like to thank everyone for attending today's webinar, and a special thanks to Hilete and Ellie for sharing their expert knowledge. If you would like to discuss today's topics in more detail, please feel free to reach out, book a consultation. Details can be found on screen now. And in the meantime, I'd encourage you all to sign up to our alerts and follow us on social media to keep up to date on the latest developments inside Canadian immigration. So until next time, everybody, stay safe.